An obese noblewoman was handed over to an Apache as punishment by her father, but he loved her like no one else. The scorching sun beat down mercilessly on Fort Benson, a dusty outpost at the edge of Apache territory. Lady Arabella Worthington stood with her head bowed, her voluminous traveling dress damp with sweat, her corset digging painfully into her flesh. Tears threatened to spill from her eyes, but she refused to give her father the satisfaction. "This is your punishment, Arabella," Lord Worthington announced coldly, his voice carrying across the fort's courtyard. Several soldiers and traders turned to watch the spectacle. "Your gluttony and disobedience have disgraced our family name for the last time." Arabella's cheeks burned with shame. At 23, she had failed to secure a husband despite her father's numerous attempts to marry her off. Her size had been a constant source of his displeasure, a reminder of her mother's weak bloodline. "Chief Maka," her father continued, addressing the tall Apache warrior who stood silently before them, "as agreed, I offer my daughter as compensation for the land dispute. She will serve your people as you see fit." Arabella's head snapped up in horror. "Father, please, silence," Lord Worthington hissed. "You've had every opportunity to prove your worth. Now you'll learn the consequences of failure." The Apache warrior studied her with dark, unreadable eyes. Unlike her father's contemptuous gaze, his expression betrayed nothing, neither disgust nor triumph. He simply nodded once, accepting the gift without comment. "She's yours now," Lord Worthington said, already turning away. "Do with her what you will." As her father mounted his horse without a backward glance, Arabella felt her world collapsing. Abandoned in a strange land, handed to a man considered savage by her people, all because she couldn't be the daughter her father wanted. The Apache approached her, his movements deliberate and calm. She flinched when he reached for her, but he merely took the small bag containing her few possessions. With a gesture, he indicated she should follow him. As they left the fort, dust swirling around them, Arabella cast one last desperate look over her shoulder. Her father was already gone, and with him the life she had known. They traveled for days across vast stretches of desert and scrubland. Arabella's feet blistered inside her impractical shoes, her skin burned despite the shawl she draped over her head, and her throat constantly ached with thirst. She expected cruelty from her captor, the savage Apache her father had described so often, but Maka remained a mystery. He didn't force her to walk beyond exhaustion. When she stumbled, he paused without comment, allowing her to rest. At night, he built fires and shared his water and food, dried meat and berries, without fanfare or expectation. His silence was neither hostile nor comforting. It simply existed, like the desert around them. "Where are you taking me?" she asked on the second day, her voice cracking from disuse. Maka pointed toward distant mountains. "Home." It was the first word he had spoken to her. On the third night, when temperatures dropped dangerously low, he wordlessly offered her an extra blanket. The gesture, small but unexpected, confused her. She had been raised to believe the Apache were bloodthirsty savages, yet this man showed a quiet consideration her own father never had. "Why did you accept me?" she finally asked. "I'm clearly a burden." Maka studied her for a long moment across the fire. "The white man does not understand value," he said simply, then returned to sharpening his knife. Arabella pondered his words as she watched him work. His hands moved with practiced precision, his profile sharp against the firelight. There was a dignity in his movements, a connection to the land that seemed to ground him. Despite her fear and resentment, she found herself observing him with growing curiosity. By the fifth day, Arabella's body had begun to adapt. Her steps grew more confident, her breathing less labored. She noticed how Maka read the landscape, finding water where she saw only rocks, spotting game where she saw only emptiness. Once, when she successfully identified an edible plant he had taught her about, the corner of his mouth lifted slightly, not quite a smile, but an acknowledgement. That night, as they made camp beneath a vast canopy of stars, Arabella realized something had shifted. The Apache was no longer just her captor. He had become her lifeline in this harsh wilderness. The Apache village appeared suddenly, nestled in a hidden valley protected by towering red cliffs. Children paused in their play as Maka led Arabella into the settlement. Women looked up from their work, their expressions curious but not hostile. Arabella clutched her tattered shawl tighter around her shoulders, painfully aware of her disheveled appearance and her size. "Come," Maka said, guiding her toward a small dwelling made of branches and animal hides. An elderly woman emerged, her face a map of wrinkles, her eyes sharp and assessing. She spoke rapidly to Maka in their language. He responded calmly, occasionally gesturing toward Arabella. "This is Nayeli," Maka explained. "My grandmother. You will stay with her." Before Arabella could protest, he turned and walked away, leaving her with the old woman. Nayeli beckoned her inside the dwelling. The interior was surprisingly cool and orderly, with woven mats covering the ground and various tools and containers arranged neatly along the walls. Nayeli pointed to a sleeping mat in the corner, then to a clay pot of water. The message was clear. This was Arabella's space, and she was welcome to refresh herself. That evening, Arabella observed the tribe's daily routines from the doorway of Nayeli's dwelling. Children helped with chores without complaint. Women worked together, grinding corn and preparing food, their movements efficient and purposeful. Men returned from hunting, sharing their bounty equally among the families. There was none of the chaos she had expected, none of the savagery her father had described. Instead, she witnessed a community bound by mutual respect and cooperation. When Nayeli brought her a bowl of stew, Arabella accepted it gratefully. The old woman watched her eat, then nodded with approval. "Thank you," Arabella said, the words feeling inadequate. Nayeli didn't understand the English words, but she seemed to recognize the sentiment. She patted Arabella's hand once, then returned to her own meal. Later, as darkness fell and fires blazed throughout the village, Arabella caught sight of Maka sitting among the tribal elders. In the firelight surrounded by his people, he looked nothing like the silent, stoic guide of their journey. Here he was respected, integral, at peace. For the first time since her father's abandonment, Arabella felt a flicker of hope. Perhaps this punishment might become something else entirely. Days passed, and Arabella struggled to find her place. Her soft hands blistered as she attempted to help with daily tasks. Her clumsy efforts to grind corn or weave baskets often ended in frustration. The women never mocked her, but their sidelong glances spoke volumes. One morning, Nayeli handed her a clay pot and pointed toward the stream. Arabella understood. Fetch water, a simple task. Yet when she filled the heavy vessel, she could barely lift it. Halfway back to the village, the pot slipped from her grasp and shattered on the rocky ground. Arabella stared at the broken pieces, tears welling in her eyes. Even this basic chore was beyond her capabilities. She knelt to gather the shards, cutting her finger in the process. A shadow fell across her. Looking up, she found Maka standing over her, his expression unreadable. She braced herself for anger or contempt. Instead, he crouched beside her and gently took her injured hand, examining the cut. From a small pouch at his waist, he produced a leaf, which he crushed between his fingers before pressing it to her wound. The bleeding stopped almost immediately. "Leave this," he said, indicating the broken pot. He handed her a smaller water container from his belt. "Start with what you can carry." The simple wisdom of his words struck her deeply. He wasn't lowering expectations out of pity. He was teaching her to build strength gradually. That evening, Arabella noticed Maka watching her across the central fire as she helped Nayeli prepare the evening meal. When their eyes met, he didn't look away. Instead, he nodded slightly, acknowledging her efforts. The next day, he appeared at Nayeli's dwelling with a bundle of plants. Through gestures and simple words, he began teaching Arabella which plants healed, which could be eaten, which were poisonous. His patience surprised her. He never showed frustration when she confused similar-looking leaves or forgot their names. "Why are you helping me?" she finally asked. Maka considered her question carefully. "You are not what your father believes," he said. "You are not what you believe either." His words lingered in her mind long after he left. For the first time in her life, someone was seeing beyond her size, beyond her failures. Someone was seeing possibility. Weeks turned into months. Summer heat gave way to cooler autumn nights. Arabella's hands grew calloused, her skin bronzed by the sun. The smaller water pot had been replaced by increasingly larger ones as her strength improved. The women of the tribe no longer watched her with curiosity, but included her in their circle, teaching her their language, showing her their ways. One evening, as the harvest moon hung low in the sky, Maka approached Arabella as she sat outside Nayeli's dwelling, working on a basket. "Come," he said simply. Curious, she followed him away from the village, up a narrow path that wound through the cliffs. They climbed in silence until they reached a ledge overlooking the valley. Below, the village fires twinkled like earthbound stars. Maka seated himself on a flat rock and motioned for her to join him. From a pouch, he produced a small wooden flute. "My father made this," he explained, running his fingers over the intricate carvings. "He taught me that music speaks when words cannot." He raised the flute to his lips and began to play. The melody that emerged was haunting, a song of longing, of beauty found in desolate places. Arabella closed her eyes, letting the music wash over her. When the final note faded into the night, she opened them to find Maka watching her intently. "It's beautiful," she whispered. "Like you," he replied, his voice low and certain. Arabella's breath caught. No one had ever called her beautiful before. She had always been the large one, the disappointment, the burden. Yet in Maka's eyes she saw no deception, only genuine appreciation. "Your father saw only what you could not do," Maka continued. "He did not see your strength, your kindness, your quick mind." He gestured toward the village below. "My people see. I see." Tears welled in Arabella's eyes. "I was nothing there," she admitted. "A failure." "Here you are becoming yourself," Maka said. He hesitated, then slowly reached out to touch her hand. "This is why I accepted you that day. Not as punishment, as possibility." Under the vast desert sky, with the village glowing below them, something shifted between them. A recognition, a connection that transcended the circumstances that had brought them together. When Maka walked her back to Nayeli's dwelling that night, Arabella realized that what had begun as her greatest humiliation had somehow become her path to freedom. The warning came with the first winter frost. A hunter returned to the village, breathless with news. White men were approaching from the east, soldiers accompanied by a civilian in fine clothes. "Your father," Maka told Arabella, his face grave. "He comes with the bluecoats." Fear gripped her heart. "Why would he return? He abandoned me." "Perhaps he regrets his decision," Maka said, though his tone suggested he believed otherwise. That night, the tribal council gathered. Arabella, now fluent enough in their language to understand, listened as they debated. Some argued for immediate relocation to their winter grounds. Others insisted on standing their ground. This was their territory by ancient right. Maka spoke last. "We will not flee," he declared, "but we will not fight unless forced. The white men's quarrel is not with our people but with me, and with her." He nodded toward Arabella. After the council dispersed, Maka approached her. "You must decide," he said quietly. "If your father has come to reclaim you, will you go?" 6 months ago, Arabella would have leapt at the chance to return to civilization, to baths and proper beds, to familiar food and language. Now, the thought filled her with dread. "My place is here," she said firmly. "With your people. With you." Something flickered in Maka's eyes. Relief, perhaps, or deeper emotion. He touched her cheek gently. "Then, we will face this together." The soldiers arrived the following day, 12 men on horseback, led by a lieutenant with hard eyes. Behind them rode Lord Worthington, looking as imperious as ever despite the dust of travel. The Apache gathered at the village entrance, neither threatening nor retreating. Makar stood at their center, tall and proud, with Arabella beside him. Lord Worthington's eyes widened when he spotted his daughter. "Arabella, thank God you're alive. We've come to rescue you from these savages." The familiar contempt in his voice made her flinch, but she stood her ground. "I don't need rescuing, Father." His expression darkened. "Don't be absurd. Look at you, dressed in animal skins, living in filth. Whatever these creatures have done to you, it ends today." Marka stepped forward, his hand raised in a gesture of peace. "She stays or goes by her own choice," he said in careful English. "Not yours, not mine." Lord Worthington's face flushed with rage. "How dare you speak to me, you—" "Father," Arabella interrupted, her voice stronger than she'd ever used with him before. "I choose to stay." "This is preposterous," Lord Worthington sputtered, his face reddening further. "Lieutenant, seize my daughter at once. She's clearly been bewitched by these savages." The lieutenant hesitated, eyeing the Apache warriors who had subtly shifted their positions, forming a protective semicircle around Makka and Arabella. "Sir," the officer said cautiously, "we were dispatched to investigate reports of a white woman being held captive, if she's staying voluntarily." "She is not in her right mind," Lord Worthington snapped. He turned to Arabella, his voice dropping to a calculating tone. "My dear, I understand you've been through an ordeal. Your condition has always made you vulnerable to manipulation. Come home, and all will be forgiven." Arabella felt Makka tense beside her. Though he didn't understand all the words, he clearly recognized the threat beneath them. "My condition," she repeated, a lifetime of shame and resentment crystallizing into clarity. "You mean my size, the great disappointment that made me unworthy of your love." Her father's expression hardened. "Don't be dramatic. I've arranged a suitable match for you, a widower with considerable holdings in Boston. He's willing to overlook your shortcomings." "Another punishment disguised as opportunity," Arabella said quietly. "No, Father. I've found something here you never gave me. Respect, acceptance, purpose." Lord Worthington's thin veneer of patience cracked. "Enough." He turned to the lieutenant. "I'm ordering you to retrieve my daughter. Now." The officer reluctantly signaled his men to advance. As they did, the Apache warriors raised their weapons, not attacking, but clearly prepared to defend. In that tense moment, Makka stepped forward, placing himself directly between Arabella and the soldiers. His voice rang out, clear and commanding. "This woman is under my protection," he declared. "By your own law, her father gave her to me. She is no longer his to claim." The lieutenant frowned. "Is this true, sir? Did you willingly give your daughter to this man?" Lord Worthington sputtered. "As punishment, not as a gift. Yet you surrendered all rights to her," Makka pressed, "before witnesses at the fort." The lieutenant looked uncomfortable. "If there was a formal transfer—" "This is absurd!" Lord Worthington exploded. "I'll not be lectured on law by a savage." In the charged silence that followed, Arabella moved to stand beside Makka. "I stay by choice," she said firmly. "Leave us in peace, Father." The standoff might have ended peacefully, if not for Lord Worthington's pride. As the lieutenant began to withdraw his men, Arabella's father suddenly drew a concealed pistol. "If I can't have my daughter back," he snarled, aiming at Makka, "then neither will you, savage." Everything happened in an instant. The gun fired. Makka moved to shield Arabella. A cry rang out as the bullet found its mark, not in Makka, but in the shoulder of an Apache warrior who had lunged forward to protect his chief. Chaos erupted. The soldiers, caught by surprise, struggled to control the situation. The Apache warriors surged forward, disarming Lord Worthington and surrounding the soldiers. "Hold!" Makka's command cut through the tumult. "No more blood!" The warriors hesitated, weapons still raised. The lieutenant, to his credit, ordered his men to stand down. "This man," Makka said, pointing to Lord Worthington, has broken peace. Take him away. The lieutenant nodded grimly. He fired without provocation. He'll face military justice. He turned to Arabella. Miss Worthington, are you certain of your decision to remain? More certain than I've ever been of anything, she replied. As the soldiers departed with her father in custody, Arabella rushed to help the wounded warrior. Drawing on the healing knowledge Maka had taught her, she cleaned and dressed his wound, applying poultices of herbs she had gathered herself. That night, as the village celebrated the warriors' bravery and their successful defense, Maka sought out Arabella. He found her sitting alone by a small fire, lost in thought. You are troubled, he observed, settling beside her. He would have killed you, she whispered. My own father would have murdered you rather than accept my choice. Maka took her hand gently. Some men cannot see beyond themselves. Your father sees you as possession, not person. Tears slipped down Arabella's cheeks. All my life, I believed I was worthless because he told me so, because I wasn't thin or graceful or obedient enough. To me, Maka said softly, you are perfect as you are, strong, wise, beautiful. He touched her face, wiping away a tear. Your body carries life well. Your heart carries kindness. Your mind carries wisdom. What more could a man want in a woman? In that moment, surrounded by the night and the distant sounds of the village, Arabella felt the last chains of her past finally break away. Spring came to the valley in a riot of wildflowers and new growth. A year had passed since Arabella's arrival among the Apache, a year of learning, adapting, and finding her true self. The woman who now moved confidently through the village bore little resemblance to the frightened, shame-filled creature who had arrived in disgrace. Her body remained full-figured, but it was strong now, capable of carrying water, gathering wood, and tending gardens. Her skin had darkened under the desert sun, and her once elaborate hairstyle had been replaced by simple braids adorned with beads and feathers. More significantly, her spirit had transformed. Where once there had been only self-loathing and fear, now there was purpose and pride. The tribe called her Nalani, meaning the heavens in their tongue, a name given to her by Nayeli, who said Arabella's eyes reflected the vastness of the sky. She had found her place as a healer, combining the knowledge Maka had taught her with remedies she remembered from her grandmother's journals. Children no longer stared at her sighs, but instead ran to her with their scrapes and fevers, knowing her gentle hands would bring relief. And Maka, the man who had received her as punishment but treasured her as gift, had become her husband in the Apache way, their union blessed by the tribal elders during the winter solstice ceremony. One warm afternoon, as Arabella gathered medicinal plants on the valley's edge, a scout approached with news. Visitors were coming, white men, but not soldiers. Among them was a woman. Curious, Arabella returned to the village. The small party that arrived consisted of a military interpreter, a doctor, and a slender woman in practical traveling clothes. Miss Worthington, the woman called, spotting Arabella. I'm Margaret Fulton from the Boston Herald. I've come to interview you about your experiences. Arabella exchanged a glance with Maka, who nodded encouragingly. My name is Nalani now, she replied. But yes, I was once Arabella Worthington. Your story has caused quite a sensation back east, Margaret explained. A nobleman's daughter, given to an Apache chief, who chose to remain with the tribe rather than return to civilization. People are fascinated. Arabella smiled. Is that how the story is told? Not an obese noblewoman handed over as punishment? Margaret looked embarrassed. Well, some less reputable papers did take that angle, I'm afraid. That's partly why I'm here, to tell the true story. The true story, Arabella said softly, taking Maka's hand, is that I was never punished. I was set free. Years passed, seasons turning like the pages of a book. Arabella, now known only as Nalani, and Maka built a life rich with purpose and love. They never had children of their own, but they became beloved figures to the tribe's young ones, teaching them the balance between the old ways and the changing world beyond their valley. The story of the noble lady and the Apache chief became legend, spreading far beyond the territories. Margaret Fulton's articles had sparked interest, then admiration, then a shift in how some Easterners viewed the indigenous peoples of the West. When Nayeli passed peacefully in her sleep, Nalani assumed her role as the tribe's elder healer and keeper of women's wisdom. Her dwelling became a place where young Apache women, and occasionally brave young white women from nearby settlements, came for counsel and learning. Maka's hair had silvered with time, but his strength remained, as did his quiet dignity. Together, he and Nalani helped their people navigate the increasingly complex relationships with white settlers and government officials, serving as bridges between worlds. On the 20th anniversary of her arrival, Nalani sat with Maka on their special ledge overlooking the valley. The village below had grown, incorporating some modern conveniences while maintaining its essential character and traditions. "Do you ever regret it?" Maka asked, his English now fluent after years of evening conversations. "Staying with us, with me?" Nalani smiled, taking his weathered hand in hers. "Not for a single moment. My father thought he was condemning me to a life of suffering. Instead, he gave me the greatest gift, a chance to discover who I truly am." Maka nodded, his eyes reflecting the sunset. "When your father brought you that day, the other chiefs thought I was foolish to accept you. They saw only a burden, a large, soft woman who knew nothing of our ways." "And what did you see?" she asked, though she knew the answer. "I saw a woman whose body spoke of abundance in a land of scarcity, whose eyes held more courage than she knew, whose spirit was trapped, waiting to soar." He touched her cheek gently. "I saw you, Nalani. Not what others claimed you were." As darkness fell and stars appeared above them, Nalani reflected on the strange path that had led her here. From rejection to acceptance, from shame to pride, from punishment to love. What her father had intended as her greatest humiliation had become her greatest blessing. In losing everything she had been raised to value, she had found what truly mattered. A love that soared beyond appearances, a purpose that served others, and a home where she belonged exactly as she was.